Hello, Transformers fans. Today I'm being joined by a very special guest, Justin Luther, who was the voice of Optimus Primal in Netflix Transformers War for Cybertron Kingdom. How's it going, Justin?
Hey, how's it going? Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. Third time's the charm. We did it. We got there.
Yes, we got it done. We were having some issues being that you're in London, I'm in LA, and we didn't know that it was 8 hours instead of 7 hours. So here we are.
We made it. We made it. So today we're going to talk about your experience working on the War for Cybertron series, but also as well, just some Transformers chat in general. And I think the best way to kick things off is to really ask you, were you a fan of Transformers prior to working on the series?
Yes, I was. So I watched as a child. I'm 35 years old, just to give people some context as far as like kind of where I was at what age I was at. So yeah, I definitely watched Transformers growing up, read the comic books as well as a child. And then I remember Beast Wars came out when I was still in elementary school, like around like fourth grade, something like that, give or take. And I remember watching and one Halloween dressing up. I actually dressed up as Megatron for
No
Halloween.
way.
Yeah. So I remember that. So I definitely was a fan growing up. And then I think when I got into my adolescent years, I got really involved in sports. And it was similar because I was a big WWE, WWF when I was a child. It was WWF for some of the younger people out there that don't that don't know that. But yeah, I was also really into wrestling. And then when I got into like I guess like high school, I started getting more into like athletics and really I always watched sports as a kid, but then I really focused my attention on like athletics, primarily football and basketball, and that just took a lot of my attention. So just I would say definitely as a kid growing up, I was a fan of Transformers, but I have friends, for example, that are my age that watched every single movie. They've kept up with everything, and just like I would consider them diehard fans of the Transformers series. So just to throw it out there, that's where I am. I definitely was a fan, but I have friends that are like diehard, like to this day fans. And as an adult, I definitely would like watch the movies and what have you. But yeah, I definitely loved Transformers and Ninja Turtles when I was growing up. Those were my
All
two
right.
my
I'm a
two things.
Turtles fan as well.
Okay,
Two good questions then.
yeah.
Favorite Transformer, and then we'll go with favorite turtle as well.
Oh, my favorite Transformers, Optimus Primal. How could it
Oh,
not
I
be?
knew he was going to say that.
I'd say growing up, I really like Megatron, and believe it or not, with Ninja Turtles, I'd like Shredder. So I was one of those kids. I
Oh,
always liked the villain. It just was something about the villain that I enjoyed, which was interesting because I wasn't like a bully. So I wasn't a bully when I was a kid or anything like that. But I definitely, it was just something about the villains that I liked, and yeah, so I'd say Megatron growing up as a kid, and I'd say Shredder and Ninja Turtles since we're talking about Ninja Turtles as well.
pretty good picks.
Yeah.
I
How
I
about you? How about
I,
yourself? What
I kind of lean towards when it comes to Transformers. I was always a fan of Starscream.
okay.
I always liked his attempts to try and topple Megatron if he could, or coming up with a bit of a plan, a conniving plan, but it never kind of worked out in the end. So I kind of like that in the G1 aspect of it. And I do really like from Beast Wars, David Kay as Megatron with his yes.
Yes.
I just kind of so I just I kind of like that. And Raphael for Turtles.
Okay.
So I was pretty simple, but
Yeah.
yeah, Shredder as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody likes a villain deep down.
Exactly. A good villain deep down. Exactly.
So you were in a pretty good place, really, to sort of take on a Transformers role of some sort when it comes to voice acting. So how did it happen, really? How did you become involved in the War for Cybertron series?
So I had a manager submit me for a project. It was an animation project, and I think that some people would find interesting is that a lot of times in Hollywood, when you're submitting your client for like an audition, sometimes, especially if it's a big project, they'll change the name so that you don't know what you're auditioning
Oh,
for. So they had a different name. They changed the character name. So I didn't know that I was auditioning for Transformers. I didn't know I was auditioning for Optimus Primal. I didn't know any of that. And so I went in to an audition room, and they had a gentleman there, and basically you have a computer and they have a mic, and they ask you just to read some of the lines. So they had me do that, and well, to rewind a little bit, they give you the sides, and then I study the sides or what have you. So I have no context as Transformers, and then I go into the audition, and this audition go on person, And then the gentleman had me read for one, and then he's like, "Oh, your voice is deeper than." He's like, "Oh, can you read?" And they had me read for like four different characters. To this day, I don't know which ones I read for. I didn't read for, but I read for four different characters. He just had me trying different characters, so to speak. And then I left, and then I get a call. Not I get a email saying that it's called a callback. So a callback means that they got a certain amount of auditions, and then they picked a certain amount of group of people to do another read. So I get the call back. I do the other read. This is from home though. So at the time, I didn't have a recording studio like I have now. So I remember going into my car, and I had a one car garage at the time, and I sat in my car with a Blue Yeti microphone and a laptop and closed, put up all the windows because I'm talking about the sound here. So a lot of people, it's just like if you're recording in an open room, it just sounds really bad. It sounds really a lot of static and things like that. So I just want the quality to be half decent. So I did that, did it, didn't think about it. A few weeks later, they called me back. They said there's another callback. So this is the third callback now. So at this time, I was with a girlfriend at the time of mine, and we were in Utah visiting her family around the holidays. No, it wasn't around the holidays. I'm sorry. It was just she had like a family emergency. And I remember getting it, and I'm like, I don't have any of my recording equipment. Like, what am I going to do? So I went in her walk-in closet and got my phone out and had like a little attachment mic, and I put blankets over myself, and I just like did it like that. So I'm just like blankets over myself, and I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, oh God, I know I'm not gonna get it. It's just like whatever. I was like, it is what it is. What are you gonna do? I didn't think of anything of it. And then my manager contacts me a few weeks after that, and he's like, hey, you booked it. And he's like, it's Transformers. And I was like, oh, I was like, wait, what? I was so confused because I was like, I hadn't heard of Transformers coming out with any new content or anything like that. And then he said, yeah, it's for Netflix and this, that, and the third, and you're voicing Optimus Primal. And obviously I was familiar with Optimus Primal. I was like, wow, that's great. So yeah, that's when I booked it. And also that was in 2019. So sometimes there's a misunderstanding of, I think sometimes people think that like, something that I booked recently and we just kind of did, but no, it was actually, I recorded that, I believe in October of 2019. So we're talking about almost 2 years ago. When I did that particular project, and my background at the time was I had voiceover experience, but that was the first. I had done some video games as well, but that was the first animation project as far as like animated television series that I had done, and it was a great experience. And I thought our voice director Philip was awesome, and the crew was awesome. But that's how I got involved with the series.
How does that work then when you're not told the characters? When you're voicing lots of different ones, do you have to put different takes on them in terms of your voice, or is it more?
Yes. You basically look at so with this also you don't even have a full script. So as actors,
Right.
voice actors, we have the lines, and there's no, like, they're not reading the opposite character's line. So you're just reading one line at a time. There's no back and forth. So you have to draw from the lines. So you just read the lines. They have a character description. So they'll say like older, wise, man, or so to speak. And from there, you look at the character description, and then you look at the lines, and then it's your job as a voice actor to bring that to life. So yeah, that's what I had to do. They gave me like a brief description, lines, and that's it. And I think it was because they didn't want us to try to sound like they didn't want me to try to sound like Garrett Chalk. And I think that was some of the things that some of the diehard fans from when I was understanding were really upset about, because our voices
Yeah.
are completely different. And I know some people are like, oh, he's actually trying to sound like um, Ron Perlman. And I just was like, well, no, it's just that my voice is deep naturally. I had no idea. Like, it was like, that's not what I was trying to do. And I even asked, I was like, oh, should I start watching some of the old school cartoons? Do you want me to switch my voices? I know their voices are different. They're like, no, just, we want you. We casted you for a reason. This is what we want from you. We want your voice. So that's how that all came up. And also I thought about it, and I think that Gary Chalk is such a legend in this industry. And I wouldn't want to try to emulate Gary Chalk's voice. Like, Gary Chalk's voice is Gary Chalk's voice. Dale's voice
Yeah.
is Dale's voice. My voice is my voice. And as a voice actor, I do have different, like, I can go deeper, I can go a little lighter, but I stick in the range of my voice, so to speak. And that's what I did with the Optimus Primal. So
I actually, well, my opinion is not really that big a deal, but I think, like, when it comes to the voice acting, that's one thing, what you said there, where you make it your own and them not telling you, you know, who you're voicing. That's quite an important part, because otherwise, like, you will try and maybe make it a bit like Gary Chalk's version or something like that. If you're given direction towards that's who you're playing. So I totally understand that. And I think that's the best way it should be, is you try and make that character your own. Otherwise, I think that's where the criticism would majorly come in, is when you try and like emulate another actor. Because I think in the War for Cybertron series, the voice actor that played Optimus Prime, he does impressions of Optimus Prime. I think I've seen him do that. So
Yes.
I think that's why that comparison came across that way. But with yours, I felt your version of Primal was a more aggressive, a little bit more confrontational, because he wanted to sort of take on Optimus at the beginning. And Gary Chalk's was a more sort of thoughtful version, a little bit more thinks about things before taking action. So very different characters in
Yes.
two different series.
That's correct. And I think that people, if you're a diehard fan of the old like Beast Wars back in the 90s, it's you want more of that. And when they saw the direction that production went with this, it was almost like its own series, so to speak. It wasn't like a pure remake of the Beast Wars version. Obviously, also because you had Transformers and then Beast Wars, and we're combining the two. So it was definitely different. And some people don't like different, and that's okay. And my thing was that they tell us as voice actors, like, don't read the comments, don't reply, don't listen to it. And I'm the kind of person where, especially where I am, and I'm like, this is the kind of career where you're going to have critics, you're going to have people that don't like it, no matter who you are. You always have those people out there. And for me, I just appreciate the fans. So if people hate it, they love it. I'm listening to people. I respect people's opinions, and I'm just curious what people think. And I also think that it's great to have open dialogue like we're having now. So it's just like, I'm all about doing interviews. I just feel like I just pick and choose the interview, so to speak, and just, like I said, I don't need somebody. I really didn't have a clear idea of what you thought of the show. It just was like, I was willing to come on here and talk to you because it's just like, we're talking about the show. We're having open dialogue. I care about the fans. And that's why I'm here, just to add some clarification on some of the decisions that I made personally as a voice actor and what my thought process was, and just to open them up to what's going on behind the scenes, so to speak. So thank you again for having me.
Oh, totally. I mean, when I got your email, I was like, wait a minute. Is this? Hold on. I wasn't sure. And I was like, could you give me a follow on Instagram just to check? I just need to check.
Yeah. You're like, can you contact me from your Instagram? And I just was like, sure. Like, I'll do it. I'll do it right away.
I never expected someone to come who was a part of the show to come across my video. So I was just like, wow. So yeah, when we decided to set this up, I thought, great. What was the actual sort of direction for Primal? What sort of were they saying to you to sort of take that route? Because I interpreted it as being a bit more aggressive, a bit more beastly as such. But what were they sort of saying to you to sort of go down that route?
Well, when I figured out, because there was a point where I did figure out it was Transformers. So before I went into the recording room, I knew at that point it was Transformers. And I definitely would watch the old series. And then I watched the one that Ron Perlman did as well. And I just was just like watching, like, also just as a fan, I just was bringing stuff back. And I hadn't seen Ron Perlman's Optimus Primal up until that point. So I just looked at the writing. I just was reading the script and studying the writing. And I felt like, especially in the beginning, he's just, like you said, he's more of like excuse my language, like a badass. He's just more just
That's
like, and there's a contrast between Prime and Primal. There's like a clear contrast between Prime and Primal, like how he was compared to how I was. But I feel like that the Primal's vulnerability started coming out as the series started coming to an end, episodes 4, 5, 6. And I wanted to display that as well. So I'm just looking at the writing and then working with Philip, who was the voice director, who's amazing. And that's how everything kind of came about with like the development of the character.
I really enjoyed the series. I think the series is really good on Netflix, and I'm hoping it kind of got left, without spoiling it for anyone, it kind of got left maybe open. So I'm kind of wondering, will there be any opportunities to see you sort of back as Optimus Primal, and them kicking on? I sort of getting a bit of indication Unicron's not quite finished yet.
Yeah, I have no idea. I'm like I said, I'm just the fan as well. So it's just like, they don't contact me or tell us anything until they're ready to decide what they're going to do with it and cast it and what have you. So I'm waiting just like everybody else. I guess it's to be continued.
I hope so, because I do think I think it's a good series, and it's nice to have some sort of new animated Transformers content. The more Transformers content, the better, because we're kind of being a bit sport at the moment. You said it was sort of recorded back in 2019, but now we're sort of getting so much stuff. We've got the movies. Do you watch the movies?
Yes, I
what's your
haven't seen the
thoughts?
last. I haven't seen the last. There's just so many. It's just like I'm one of those people. Like I watch the first few and then I kind of just like lose track. It happened with Star Wars too. I just lost track of all the movies. I couldn't name every Star Wars movie right now. But yeah, the movies. I like the movies. And I know that they're coming out. I think next summer they're coming out with
New one, Rise of the
the new one.
Beasts.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see that. And like I said, again, people were upset. A lot of fans seemed upset that Gary Chalk wasn't doing the voice for Primal, and they went with Ron Perlman, and that was their decision. But regardless, I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see what he does with the character this time around. And just
Yep.
I'm also curious as a voice actor. Obviously, he did. I believe 2018 is when he did Optimus Primal. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
he
that was
did the Powers
2018.
of Prime
That was a
series, I
Prime
think.
series. Yeah, I think that was in
Yeah.
2018. So now I'm curious to see, like in 2022, 4 years later. Obviously, it's a movie. There's a different director. I'm sure there's a different director. So it's just like I'm curious to see what he does with the character and how it sounds compared to like what he did in 2018. So I think that's exciting.
I sort of think your sort of take on the character, if it's going to, because I've seen the concept art of Primal, and I sort of feel your sort of take on the character is the sort of way maybe they should sort of go, because Ron Perlman in Powers of Prime is very, I'd say his voice is very reserved. He's a lot more, even more reserved maybe than Gary Chalk. It's got very much kind of robotic as such as well. So I am interested as well to see how that sort of comes across. If he sticks with that voice, or whether he adapts it or adjusts it and makes it a little bit more beastly, because you always feel like they're gonna, with the live action franchise, they're gonna maybe go a little bit more oomph to it.
Yeah,
So
that's what I figured. And I didn't realize, like, if you didn't tell me that was Ron Perlman, I would not have recognized that was his voice.
no,
And I've looked at a lot of his work and I've heard a lot of his work and seen him on TV. So it just was interesting. I would not have known that was his voice. And I know with the Transformers, I definitely lightened my voice. And at the time, there's so much I learned from it. And just like some of the people that just like, well, there's people that have bashed me, and that's fine. I just kind of just like laugh, but I respect them. Like I even had an open dialogue with a gentleman on Instagram that had commented on the picture. It was pretty negative, and I just reached out to him and was just, but he created toys. He was like making some like a Transformers figurines, and we had a conversation, just like a nice back and forth. But I didn't get all upset with them and start like talking crazy. And we went from literally him like saying some things that some of it wasn't even factual to like having this open dialogue. And then I commented on one of his Primal like toys, and now we're cool, and we just like he just was like, yeah, I'm like looking forward to seeing your work in the future, because it just was like, yeah, this was like, I'm all about open dialogue and just having conversation and like respecting people's opinions. Like I'm not one of those people like you have to love it or I'm not going to talk to you. So yeah, I think that's very important. So I'm just excited, yeah, to see what Ron Perlman did, regardless of what direction that they go in. But with my voice, like I was saying, my voice, I did lighten it. And at the time in my mind, it was because I listened to the two other, and their voices are just not near, it's just not as deep. It just wasn't as
no.
deep. So as a voice actor, as a young voice actor, that played in my mind. So I was lightened my voice. And who's to say if I would have did that now, maybe I just necessarily maybe I wouldn't have done that. I'm not sure, but that's something that definitely played into my mind as far as that's the one change I say that I definitely made, was definitely just lightening my voice a little bit instead of it being too deep. Because even some of the fans that talked about it, they said, oh, he sounds more like a villain, because usually villains have the more deeper resonant voices. But I was like, I mean, I heard some people say that, but I didn't, who knows?
No, I sort of think that it just came across as a more sort of a more aggressive tone to it, because at the beginning, Optimus Primal was clashing with Prime, and he was trying to make clear, where he was coming from. So I didn't really feel it came across like that. But again, everyone has their own interpretation of everything. So,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
saying that, I've got some subscriber questions for you. So,
Okay.
there's nothing too bad in here, so don't worry about it.
Okay. Not at all.
So the first one is from Dave the Mighty Llama, which is a great name in itself. But
Yeah, it is a great name. Hey, Dave.
what led you to start voice acting in the first place?
That is a great question. So I I moved to LA in 2013, and you and I discussed that. That's a whole nother story. But I moved out here, and it wasn't for voice acting. That wasn't what it was for. It actually had to deal with professional wrestling.
I'm going to ask you about that a little bit
Okay,
later. I
gotcha. So
have to
I'll
ask you.
hold, yeah, I'll hold that. So yeah, I came out here, and then I had just had people saying, "Oh, you have a great voice. You should be doing voiceovers." And I was taking some acting classes, and this woman referred me to like this voiceover coach who was really well known. I was like, okay. So I take his class. It was a 4-week seminar, and I'm thinking about, okay, I'm going to take this 4-week seminar, and then after that, I'm gonna get a reel, and then after I get my reel, I'm gonna get an agent, and then I'm gonna start booking work. I'm gonna be doing commercials and animation shows and what have you. So that was in 2014, and then I yeah went to the class, and he was great. And I had it was like a class of like 8 of us, and after the class, like everybody's like, "Oh, like wow, Justin, that was great." Da, 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 da. I'm like, "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you." So after the class was over, next step was like the intermediate class in the working actors voice actors class. So I did that class, and then everybody except me, he was basically like he asked me to repeat the class,
Oh.
and I was so offended. Like I was like, and to this, when I look back and here, I was like, oh, I see why he wanted me to repeat the class because I was so focused when you're talking in front of a mic. I was so focused on sounding a certain way, and I didn't care what the script said. I just was talking like this.
That sounds
So
like
it
my
just was like,
videos.
yeah, oh no, you sound great. So I just was like, yeah. So he asked me to repeat the class. Needless to say, I didn't go back and repeat the class. 3 years go by. I'm in New York City doing some theater and studying theater, and they had a voiceover coach, Anna Gardunia, come in, and she was like, she taught us like for 4 weeks, and she said she pulled a few of us aside from the class. She said, "Hey, you three need to get into voiceovers. Like, if you need help, let me know, but whatever." So I started working with her. I got a reel, and then I sent my reel out. Wasn't really getting anything. So then I just was like, I'm done. 2019, my manager asked, "Hey, do you have a voiceover reel?" And I was like, "Yeah, I produced one." But he's like, "Hey, just give it to me. There's some things coming up." He's like, "I'm going to start sending it out, and we'll see what happens." And then 2019 is when I started. He started sending some things out, and then I started booking some voiceover work outside of animation projects. And then from there, that's when I booked Transformers, and then everything just from there. Even though I couldn't talk about Transformers, everything in 2019 just started picking up, and it just started clicking, and it was because I just needed to learn. It just was I needed my time to really learn, and just I also needed to get over my pride and over the criticism. It was almost like I just didn't like the criticism, and now I'm in a place where yeah, it was one of those things that that's how I got into it, Dave, and that was like the longest answer probably ever, but it was like something that I love. Like I love this. Like I love what I'm doing right now. Like I even work with some children and beginners, and just like I just love this. It's just like something I love doing. But it was something that I had people growing up like telling me, "Oh, you have a voice." Like I had a high school teacher that told me I should, go into radio, and it just never transpired because I just had other interests. But it wasn't until now. So I just say to anybody out there, if you're looking into getting into voiceover work or voice acting work, if it's something you're curious about, nowadays there's just so many options. 95% of the stuff's being done from home. So it's just like no matter where you live nowadays, there's just so many options. And if you have any questions, I'll give some contact information. I'm all about just giving people information, contact. It's not something I'm charging for. It's just like if I can help put you in the right direction or just give you some basic answer some basic questions after you've done some research. Because sometimes people ask me a question. I'm like, well, did you do any like research whatsoever? It's like, how do I get an agent? I'm like, oh, okay, hold the time out. It's just like, just listen. Let's just get some. Have you taken classes before? Like, what city do you live in? Maybe I can find out, some referred classes or whatever. So yeah, I'm all about helping people in that regard as well. And I just love what I do, and I love that through my experiences, I'm able to then take my experiences and show people, hey, don't do this. You probably shouldn't do that. This is why I didn't get into it's 5 years later, then I should have probably gotten into voiceover because I didn't want somebody critique me or want to repeat something. Instead of listening to why they wanted me to do that, I was just so hung up on, well, I thought I sounded great, and everybody else in the class is going to the next class. So why am I not going to the class? Like everybody else said I was great. And it's like, yeah, but the person that matters, the person that owns the studio, the person that everybody's paying to teach you said you're not. So, and he doesn't have a personal vendetta against you. So it's just like, why don't you listen? So yeah, that's how I got into voice acting, and I'm very blessed and appreciative that I am working in this industry.
That was a great answer. It was a really great answer. And it was good insight as well for anybody as well. So thank you, Dave. We got another one from Harlan Perry. If you could be any other Transformer, who would it be?
Megatron.
So I'm going to follow up on that, and I'm going to say, could you give us a voice that you would do for Megatron if you had to do one?
Megatron.
This can be your live action voice for Megatron.
Your job is to kill Optimus Primal. I don't know what you're thinking. Where is Optimus Primal? What are you gonna do? Find him! I would add a little more bass to it. I wish I don't have line. That was just improv lines. So now somebody's gonna bash me for that and say I wasn't conversation or whatever. But I just try to give you something. So yeah.
I dig it. I kind of thought you'd go Megatron after I put a little bit of conversation.
I would go Megatron. Yeah, for sure. I'd go Megatron.
D'Angelo says, how did you perfect the voice for your interpretation of Optimus Primal compared to Gary Chalk and Ron Perlman? And did you ask any of them for advice? I was going to actually ask you that, but I kind of took that maybe you didn't get to catch up with them.
Yeah, I didn't ask them for advice for the simple fact that I just felt like it's hard to get in contact with some people, especially when they don't know who you are. So at the time, I didn't have really any recognition because the things that I was doing were things like, like I said, like a video game, like some video game stuff and some commercials and what have you. But that's not stuff to get, to be able to usually get in contact with people. So I listened to their work. I definitely listened to their work. And my director did not want me to try to emulate them, but I definitely did listen. I think that it definitely, even though it told me not to try to sound like them, I definitely lightened my voice. I definitely lightened my natural voice to the point where some people didn't, like the people that know me, that grew up with me when they saw the series, are like, oh, they're like, yeah, oh yeah, now I hear it. Like they just were like, it was just a little, they take a while to them get used to it because I have a certain way I speak, and yeah, so I was not able to speak to them, but I did watch the content, and I think what I came up with the voice, I just was focused on the script, and also there's a certain pacing with the show. So
yeah,
and that's another thing I want to explain to people. So all the actors aren't in the room reading the lines back and forth. So like when we're doing our scenes, I'm not with Prime. What we're doing is we have our sides and we're reading line by line. So there's no line being read back to me. I can see the other line, but we're focusing on a line by line basis. So it's not, and now for some films and shows, they do have the back and forth. So like there is situations where they do. I'm just talking about with this particular series, all the actors weren't in the room. It was one actor at a time. And yeah, I was really focused on the writing and just bringing the character to life, and also finding that vulnerability in the character, because I felt that I wanted that, and the writing helped to bring that out closer to the end as opposed to the beginning, because like you said, he was aggressive, and then from there he kind of just lightens, at the end, so to speak, and just some really beautiful moments, I believe, between Prime and Primal later on in the series.
I have to say, I think that was the natural progression, really, because it was like they were at each other's heads initially, and then for the greater good, sort of eased off, mellowed out, and became friends. So yeah. Paid Rain Cloud 15. I've got some great names here.
Those are wonderful names.
What was it like taking on such an iconic character and adding your own stamp when it came to voicing Primal?
That's a great question. Looking back, I don't think I understood back when I was recording 2 years ago. I was like, wow, I was excited. I was like, wow, really, two only men have really ever done this voice, really, like in the States that I know of. So I was just like, it's such an honor, and I want to do the role at the best of my ability. And I know that, like I remember somebody sending me something after season 1 came out, like Gary Chalk had said some negative stuff about the series, and people were like, "Oh, like, are you gonna when yours comes out if he says anything?" I'm like, "No, like, absolutely not. Like, he's entitled to his opinion. I have nothing but respect for Gary Chalk. I think he's highly talented, obviously, and yeah. So no, it just was like I think that. But looking back, I didn't know this was coming. Like as far as like when it actually came out, and there just was like from the diehard. I thought there was 3 different types of people. So you have the people that never really watched Transformers that like watched it because it was something new on TV or something new that they heard about it. It looked cool. You have the younger kids that weren't alive for the old school Transformers and Beast Wars. So even if they've heard of it or they've seen the movies, like they don't really understand this what it was back then, or they don't even know who Gary Chalk was. If you ask, like a lot of if you ask a 16-year-old who's Gary Chalk, they probably don't know. So it's just like, and then from there you had another group, probably 4 groups, another group like myself that was a fan growing up as a child, and then as I got older, kind of like wasn't really in touch with the series, so to speak, as I grew older. And then you have the fourth is like the diehard like Transformers like fanatics, which I appreciate, but those are the ones that I didn't anticipate because it was just like there was a lot of negative comments about a lot of different things. It just wasn't about myself. It was about all different types of characters, all the actors suck. I could have did a better job than that. Where do they get these people? Like all that stuff. And I think that I'm just I know, I don't keep on saying I think. I know that it just was I'm 35. This point in my career, this was the best time for this to come out because when I was younger, I definitely was much more like almost like I don't know if how many people are familiar with like Kevin Durant as far as he's a basketball very famous like basketball player in the NBA, but he's known for like responding to everybody on like Twitter and just like well, at least like some of the really negative. He'll just respond to negative comments, and it just was like that's how I would have been before. Like if this was a few years ago, I would
Yeah.
have been on there all day long responding to every old person. And now I just have such a like I really generally like people. I'm like I generally like people. I love meeting new people. Like I'm the kind of guy I go to the grocery store. I'm like talking to the cashier or like the bagger. Like I like people. And so like now that I'm at this stage of my life, it's just like I'm very open to people and their opinions. And I didn't realize how big this was going to be, so to speak, in so many people's eyes and so many people's other fans, and how opinionated a lot of people were going to be, so to speak. So that's the one thing I didn't anticipate. And it's just like a learning experience, and my voice acting career really is just getting started. I've been very fortunate in the years that I've been doing this, and I've had successes that it takes some people years to get to, and I'm just very fortunate and just very appreciative. And I always look at that performance and like, you know what, like if I'm asked to do another series or into the next series that I do, I'm always going to work harder, I'm always going to put in more work, and I'm always going to improve. So that's where I'm at with it.
Well, I hope you do get that opportunity. And in terms of the overall with Transformers, that seems to be the regular across any of the series or the live action films, because there's always going to be those comparisons. We had it with the Transformers movies when
Mm-hmm.
Frank Welker wasn't used and Hugo Weaving was used. So it's always going to be open to interpretation, and
Yeah.
some people are going to like certain versions and other
Mm-hmm.
people are going to like other versions. So it's it's what you prefer and what you like. But I think as well for yourself and for the new Transformers fans, this gave them a completely different take on Transformers as such, and it gave them a good opportunity to see a different side to the Transformers, because otherwise you probably would have had the same style. What's your thoughts on? I've probably got to ask you this about the union stuff, because that comes up all the time, whether a franchise uses union actors, voice actors, like David Kay, Gary Chalk, and people like that, Peter Cullen, over, say, new actors who aren't union. I didn't think this series was that way inclined. It was more a case of just taking on new actors to give a new take for a new series. That's the way that I sort of saw it. But everybody goes back to the union bit, and I don't really know if that is the case for the Netflix series at all.
Well, they did. I was confused personally about the whole union thing,
Yeah,
and now I am union. So if there's another one, I wouldn't. People that's when
it
people talk
doesn't
about
matter.
well, yeah, when they're like, oh, well, he's not. I'm like, well, I am union now. So that's false. But the whole thing with the union, this is what people have to understand. Number one, like when you say the union, it's not as hard. Like, for example, I got into the union. The first project I did, it's called a Taft Hartley. So like it was like I did it was like an independent web series And it was I got a Taft-Hartley. I didn't even know really what that meant, but what it means is that they're saying there's a reason why they need you, a non-union person, for this particular part. And also, I had more. You have to say more, I think, than 5 words. Like, the union has their own thing. So if you get one of those, you can get into the union. Or if you do, I believe it's 3 extra backgrounds, and you get vouchers. And how you get a voucher is kind of odd, but they might like your tie and put you up in the front. But it can take years to get vouchers. So for some people, like a lot of my friends, it took like six to 10 years to become union. But a person like myself, it really didn't take that long. So like when you say a union actor, like there's levels to union actors. Like, because a union actor only, I believe, like I think 2%, and don't quote, I mean, people can Google this, but it's something like 2% of union actors make enough to uh, like get medical insurance, so to speak, or it's like, so make enough to make an honest living, so to speak, without having to work other jobs or something like that. So I think people have to understand, when you say union actor, there's levels. Like, Gary Chalk isn't just a union actor. Like, Gary Chalk is like beyond just a union actor. He is in the union. I am in the union, but there's levels to being in the union. As far as Netflix's decision to go with union actors, I can't speak on what their decision making was. Obviously, there's like a budget, and I mean, that's just common sense. So there's a budget.
Yeah.
Obviously, going non-union is going to be less of an investment than having to pay for Gary Chalk and Peter Cullen and everybody else that was involved. So they made that decision, and as my voice actor, I'm just the one getting hired, and I just do what I can with the job. But yeah, I am a union actor now, so I wouldn't be able to do non-union work, so to speak. So that's my take on it. Hopefully that answers the question.
I bet many people didn't know that. So there you go. That's an
Yes.
enlightening one. Lastly, before I let you go, I have to ask you about your wrestling career, because I got a wrestling YouTube channel as well. That's sort of where I sort of started things. So I have to ask you about this and your time spent training with the Dudley boys, and how close did you get to WWE?
So I started training with the Dudley Boys. It was Team 3D, because at that point, it was 2012. They were in TNA at the time. So it was Team 3D Wrestling Academy. And it was in right outside, it was like in Orlando. And I was there 2012. I moved there and decided that I wanted to be a professional wrestler. So I trained with them and worked a lot with Devon in the beginning. Devon works with the beginners, and then Bubba works with the when you get to like that advanced level. And it was literally Monday through Friday, 6 hours, 7 hours of training a day. And I lived in a wrestling house. There was like a little like swamp. Like, and I'm from Philly. I'm a city boy, so it just was like there's like a little swamp area. I'm like in the middle of nowhere, and I'm doing this wrestling training. And then on the weekends, I would bartend at Outback Steakhouse. And yeah, I just was training, and it's just like you have to like learn a certain amount of moves. I think it was like 30 moves or something like that, and get an endurance. And I had they called him Apache Dan. He was the most, you could write so many movies about this guy. He was like this Apache, like long hair, big. He was like an arm wrestling champion, and he was like our athletic trainer, and he would just like tear us apart. That we would just be like, it was like, so it was so much physical, just wear and tear on the body, which is unbelievable. So I was doing it, and it was one of those things where I'm 6'4", and at the time I was around the size I am now. I was like two 230, give or say 225, 230. And yeah, everybody was just telling me, like, I know that Bubba was telling me, like, he would call me like Rocky, like meaning like the Rock, just like trying to say like, oh, we got to get you to be that next big thing. And there was a lot of pressure, because there was a lot of people looked at me, and I have a certain physique, and they're just like, you're saying things like, oh, you got to be, we want to push you to that level and get to that level. So I'm doing the training, and I did not really enjoy the physical aspect of it. I got into a motorcycle accident 2 years prior. I broke my fibula tibia. I have a metal rod still connecting, helped my ankle to my knee, and I also was 2012. So I was 26. Yeah, I was 26. So, and that's somewhat, it's not like late to start your wrestling career, but it's still like you're still a little older. It's not like I was in like my early 20s. Some of those guys were like 19, 20 and just starting out. And I was starting like at 26. And then I just felt like there was something missing as far as like the persona, like the wrestling persona. I didn't have like a character. Like there was no like
Oh,
character. And they called me Robo. And the reason they called me Robo is when I walked in the first day, they said I looked like RoboCop. Because like I just walked in, they said I looked like a cop, and I looked like RoboCop, and I just walked in, and I was like, my lats were all stuck out, and I just walked in like this. I'm like, is this the rest? Is this Team 3D Academy? And it's like, you know it's Team 380 Academy. You saw the sign, but it's just like that's how I like walked in with my bag like this, and it was funny. So yeah, I was out there for a year, and then 2013 New Year's Day, I went out to L.A. and from there started working with an acting coach, and pretty early on in the whole LA experience, I just was like, I liked LA, and I just realized I was going into wrestling for the wrong reasons. My reasons for going into wrestling wasn't because I enjoyed it. My reasons were just being on TV and making money, and it was like something I felt like I could be good at and just like get the fame. And I just realized that's just the lifestyle, being on the road 300 days a year and just
Yeah.
talking to some of the wrestlers that I was able to talk to. I realized that it wasn't for me. Also, like back then, I was like partying a lot and just like running around and drinking. So I know if I was on the road 300 days a year, it would be, you just see some of the stories from the older guys, and it's just like, it was a blessing. And people sometimes they'll ask like, oh, like, do you ever regret it? And I know I have a buddy that would talk to Bubba, and apparently I haven't confirmed this with Bubba or anything, but he used to ask like, oh, where's Robo? Oh, Robo's still in L.A. He's like, what a waste of size, just like the stuff like that. And yeah, so that was it. So I'd say that had I gone back, I would have finished with them, and they got my tryout with WWE. And there was also like, if WWE didn't happen, TNA would have definitely been in the cards. So
Awesome.
I was close, but I didn't do it. And I had a background in personal training. It was personal training. I was doing the acting, and yeah, and then I just was continue on with the acting. But as we know, I think people don't understand. Like with acting, it's much more. It's a grind, and it's like in the beginning, for many years you're not really making much money. Like even if you're on TV, people see you're on TV, like, oh wow, you're on TV, and I was like, yeah, I made like $2,000, but you're like, yeah, that's one role I booked in 6 months, so it's just like you can't live off of that. So yeah, so I just kept up with the acting. Then voice acting came into my life, and yeah, now I'm an actor. I do voice acting, and I love it. I signed a few months ago with DPN, which also represents Ron Perlman. So
Ah, awesome.
that was a blessing, and yeah, it just shows me that I have a long way to go. But that's why I just appreciate channels like yours, because it just gives me an eye and just kind of seeing what people are saying, good, bad, okay, and yeah, I just like kind of draw some stuff from that, and yeah, so the wrestling, that was not my path, but I have so much respect for all those wrestlers, and just like a lot of those guys, they really love it. I saw it. Like some like the guys I was wrestling with, they like would go to like the independent shows. They'd wrestle. They'd be like, I'm wrestling. I'll wrestle for $5. I don't care. And I didn't have that mindset. I'm like, wait, how much does the independent show pay? They're like, oh, $20. I'm like, I don't want to do that. And they're like, that's when I knew it wasn't for me. Because with voiceover, it's like at Union, I like, yeah, I'm not going to do like a voiceover for $5 or anything like that. But I love it so much that like if it wasn't going to affect or like pay or anything like that, like I could literally do this and just like free and just like enjoy it, so to speak. So it's like I don't do this for the money. I mean, obviously the money's there and that's great, but I genuinely enjoy what I do right now. And this is the first time in my life I've ever done. I've had a few different career paths, and this is the first time that I've ever been doing something that I love and being able to make a living off of it. So I'm very gracious for that.
I can feel your passion, so I can tell. And did doing promos actually help sort of voice acting as such? Did that sort of help transition, cutting
Yeah,
cutting promos?
it definitely, yeah, like cutting promos definitely helped with that, and also the acting helps like just tenfold, because it's I just have these auditions and just reading, and just like it's just the reading too. That's another thing with voiceover. It's like getting comfortable with reading aloud, because it's when I first got into voiceover, it was just like I never read aloud. I was like, if I'm like reading the Bible, I would just like read it to myself, so to speak, just like in my,
Yeah.
when I'm just reading. So reading aloud, you'd be surprised, like if you start reading aloud, how many times you're gonna like fumble words, or like there's some tongue twisters and like things that like you're saying. And like even as a voice actor now, I'll be doing something, I'll be doing like a promo, or I do like a lot of like meditation stuff, and I'll be reading something, and I'll be like, once upon a time in a what world world, or like, oh, KK clothing. So I'll be like, yeah, please come out to KK clothing, please come out to please come out to KK. And I just like, like I get back into wrestling mode. I'm like, can't like I'm yelling in my freaking booth. Like if anybody saw some of the things that like voice actors do, like, or like we'll put like a wine cork in your mouth, because that helps kind of open up the words and everything, help everything breathe. So you
Right.
talk with a wine cork in your mouth, and you're ready to hold like this, and then you take it out, and then you can just perfectly enunciate all the words. So yeah, that's the promos definitely did help with that.
That's totally like when I'm trying to write my videos and I'm reading my script out, and then it's like the amount of times I think I've had to restart. And if everybody saw how many times you could, well, probably curse or something like that, you think, damn. But it's been awesome speaking to you today. It really has, Justin. I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me. Would you let everybody know where people can find you, and if you've got any upcoming projects that you want to sort of shout out and let everyone know about? Because definitely let my fans know that what's going on with you.
Yeah, and just I want to take a quick time just to thank you, Dale. Thanks you for giving me the opportunity to speak on your platform. And thank all the fans out there. I want to thank my mother. I just have to thank my mother. I love you, Mom. And I also, really quick before I get the information, I just want to tell people, like, regardless of what you do, because, and I know, Dale, you can speak on this, because a lot of people are creating YouTube channels. I just want to tell people that a lot of times when we hear critiques, a lot of people just stop doing stuff because people say negative things about what they're doing, and we really genuinely care. We say, "Oh, I don't care what they think," and like sometimes a lot of people really do care what people think, and it's why they stop doing what they're doing. And I just want to tell people, because I was there at a point, like I was there where I would stop doing things. People said, "Oh, you suck," and this, that, and the third. But whether you're going to start a YouTube channel or your whatever it is you're doing in your life, like just try to take those critiques and just kind of take something from it. And sometimes you realize people are just going to be negative sometimes, but other times if it's negative, people sometimes can't maybe put it into words that are like respectful, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But never give up on what you're trying to do, because I'm sure Dale can attest, like having a YouTube channel, like getting 100 subscribers is hard. Like getting these subscribers is like not easy. Getting these views is not easy. And just like it's hard in the beginning, but just like keep pushing forward, keep moving forward. There's always going to be somebody that doubts you. There's always going to be somebody that has something to say. You're not good. You suck. You're not as good as Dale's channel, this, that, and the third. And I really wanted to get that message out there, because I really stopped a lot of things in life because it was like, oh, you suck, or you don't do as good as this. And it really just like took me almost like 32, 33 years to realize that, like, yeah, no, I'm going to keep going this. I'm keep pushing forward, learn from my past experiences, and just I just really wanted to get that out there to everybody listening. I know somebody that was meant for somebody out there, so keep moving forward. And yeah, I'm on Instagram, the Justin Luther, so THE Justin Luther. And then my Instagram page is interesting. I've just started. I'm a very private person, so I don't like post a ton of stuff. And like early on, it was like, sometimes I'd have like a girlfriend like, oh, like we're at the pool, take a picture coming out of the pool. So my friends make fun of me sometimes. Some of my pictures I have no shirt on. It's just like, so just be easy on me, guys. So it's some of my Instagram, content. As I'm now getting more and more involved with my career, and also realizing that people have taken interest in what we do as people. I'm definitely going to start posting more of the stuff that I'm working on. A lot of this stuff have NDA, so I can't even talk about it. But I have a project coming out next year on a streaming service. I don't even know if I can say what streaming service, but I have something coming out next year. So I'll keep people posted with that. And then yeah, I'm pinned for a couple shows. A pin means it's down to you and a few people. So yeah, I definitely will keep people updated. And then yeah, I'll give them my Instagram, because I'm not on Twitter. I don't really use Facebook, and I think the Instagram is also a good place to yeah, if you ever want to DM and you have any questions or comments. I'm one of those people where eventually you reach a point, like when you're Dwayne Johnson, I'm sure you can't respond to everybody, you can't read everybody, but I'm one of those people where I definitely, it might take some time, but I definitely respect everybody's opinion, and I want to be able to answer questions as I can. And I've definitely given effort. Yeah, if people reach out to respond and just be available. I know that sometimes it feels like people are like untouchable, and we live in this Instagram era where we look at followers and you're like, oh, he has 20,000 followers. And I look at that like, yeah, 20,000 followers means that like you have time to, like, if you wanted to, like, respond to people. Like, that's not like, come on now. There's levels to this. Again, there's levels to this. Like, there's a difference between 20,000 and like, 500,000. It's a little like different. So like where I'm at now is just like, I'm open to people. I'm available. I'm here, and I appreciate you all.
That what you said about people making comparisons and stuff, I would just say, to add to that, you know, don't compare yourself to anyone else, really. Just do what you do best. I mean, when I started doing my YouTube channel, I had like a camera phone, and I had terrible audio, and it was awful. Not gonna lie, when I go back and
Yeah.
watch it, but I just thought I got to get started somewhere, and I got to see how I get on. And it's the best way to be, because not everyone's going to like your take on things and the way that you do things. And you've just got to basically think, well, I can only do my best. And if you constantly compare yourself to someone else, and it's a bit like what we talked about with the Gary Chalk stuff as well. If you always are trying to emulate someone else and be like someone else. You should just be you and try and develop yourself and be in your lane and stick to what you're doing, because 9 times out of 10, your path and you pushing forward doing that will end up being the best route for you, as opposed to trying to copy someone else and just trying to be someone else.
Yeah, and I totally agree. Unless they ask you to sound like, unless sometimes they want you to sound like that, and they're like, okay, well, we need you to sound like this. They'll pick a voice that is very like relates to Gary Charles' voice, for example, and that's fine if that was the direction. But that wasn't the direction, and that's just what it was. So.
And also as well, I would say, I'm going to post your Instagram link in the description of this video. And it has been awesome speaking to you today. I've had a great time. And you are a sound guy. Like, you're just a decent guy. So.
Oh, I appreciate it. I know that, my Instagram pictures, you see a big guy with tattoos or whatever, but no, I try to be a
I wouldn't mess with you. I would not mess with you.
Yeah, no, I'm just a relaxed guy. I just, like I said, I love people. And thanks again for having me, Dale. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure I'll be talking to you in the future about something. So
I hope so.
Talking about something. I wanted to thank you for earlier.
It's been amazing speaking to you, Justin Luther. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dale. Have a wonderful day.
You too.